Well, you guys ready to get started?
You have already been turned?
I did, yeah.
Oh, it's just.
Okay, so we've been doing kind of lots of Python stuff this week. There's learned about GitHub CI and some unit testing. If you watched the video, anyone want to give us the recap? What is CI, if you've heard such a term?
Continuous integration.
All right, what does that mean to be continuously integrating?
It means like every time you upload your code to the repo, it tests it every time effectively. Like it makes those pipeline where you can test stuff all the time so that you aren't just like testing at the end, testing every stage of the process.
Yeah, so I mean, there's different models about how we go about kind of developing and being part of a software team. And so one model would be we all sit down at the beginning of the project, we decide what the code's going to be like, we go off, we write all the code, we bring it all back together, and then we say, okay, we should probably do some testing. And now that we're done with the code, let's make sure that it all works and build some test cases and see if we have to fix any bugs. But that's not really how things are done these days, because it's you're just going to get yourself in a total mess. Okay, if you go off and spend months in your team writing code and then come back together, you'll find you probably had incorrect assumptions about what you need to do. Maybe different people approach things differently, and they don't work together, and probably nothing actually works. And so kind of the software community is changing to this idea of continually testing all the time. So basically, anytime we make changes, we check that the code still all works. And we don't wait. It's not kind of this linear timeline of develop and then test. It's just develop and test all the time. And so sometimes developers these days even advocate for write the tests before you write the code. So it's basically like, well, if I want to make a function that sorts some numbers, the first thing I'm going to do is write a function that checks if it's sorted, and I'll have that first before I actually go write any sorting code. Because then as I take my sorting code and I improve it and I make it faster and more efficient, I can just kind of every step along the way check that it's working and I haven't broken anything. And so you may have seen this as you contributed. Many of you have created pull requests and contributed to the bootcamp webpage. If we go and look at this one, okay, you'll see that there's actually, let's find a pull request, something that's closed here. So I could see here the old tests. So what happens when there we go. Okay. So some things that happen here. So actually, anytime somebody makes a pull request on the bootcamp webpage, it runs a test here to make sure that it built correctly. And so it's pretty neat in the fact that it's doing all of this remotely on GitHub servers. Okay, so it's basically getting the code, installing some packages, building the website, and kind of wrapping things up to see that it worked correctly. And so I think in the video, hopefully you watch the video, it goes through a lot of these things and how to set it up. I mean, what I planned here today was really just to answer questions you had and then maybe walk through kind of some really simple Python code about making some unit tests. Maybe we could make a repository, set this all up from scratch so you could kind of see walking all the way through. So are there questions before we jump into that? Questions you had from watching the video? Q&A, no questions, just want to Just came for to be entertained. Yeah.
So these tests are mainly meant to be used for like automatically checking code and make sure it won't like destroy a repository if it gets added.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is that as you fix bugs and or add new features, that you don't break other things along the way. And so at first, as you kind of learn about all this testing stuff, I think the gut reaction is to feel like it gets in the way. You're like, I just want to go write my code. I don't want to write all this testing garbage. Like that doesn't help me get my code done. That's just extra stuff. But to me, it's like this safety net that I quite like. So when if I were to contribute to a large project, and maybe you're contributing to your team's research project, I really like it that when there's lots of tests in place, because then I feel less worried on my part that I'm screwing something up. Okay, if I contribute to a repository and there's no tests, I'm like, uh-oh, I really have no idea whether I've like, in fixing something, I've totally broken everything for them. And so let me show you one repository I contribute to. Okay, so this is, so my student Joshua, let's see, let's find Joshua has a pull request from this week. Okay, so he just updated the documentation a little bit on this repository. So you'd think, hey, I mean, updating the documentation, that's probably pretty safe. It's probably not going to break anything. But it's nice to know that that's really the case. So if we go down here, you'll see that it performed 39 different checks. Okay, and these are all pretty substantial. Some of them take overnight to run. And so when we contribute to this repository, we create a pull request and then we come back the next day to see that it's passed all of the tests. And so if we actually go through and look at these, just kind of a sampling of what you can do. Okay, it's basically just running lots of different code tests, but it's not all code tests. Some of these are building. This is doing Python linting. These are unit tests that we'll do some examples of. Checking for compiler warnings. Kind of building with different options, running Valgrind. Some of you talked about that in your CS class, they run it with Valgrind. Yeah.
So this is just a touch on
Yeah.
topic, but like obviously it takes a lot for a website like this. How do they make it work?
How does, I don't know, what do you think? It requires a lot of Microsoft servers to run all this stuff. And actually yesterday when we ran this, some of these are actually running on Google servers because we have some Google collaborators. And at first we were running this and it's like, ran out of servers. And we talked to our Google people yesterday, like, yeah, you ran out of Google servers. And we're like, we didn't think that was really possible. But so I don't know. Why did Microsoft pay lots of money for GitHub and how do they make any money? So some things like if your repository is private, you have to pay for all this compute time. So if you have tests that run for a long time, like if you're to go into your, I won't go there, but if you're going to your billing information for say your organization or your personal user account on GitHub, it'll say you have this many minutes left of server time for this month. And I think maybe they give you a little bit, but you can burn through it pretty quickly. Now, if your repository is public, there's no limit. So I don't know, how do they make their money on public repositories? Maybe it's just they figure, hey, so there's always a form of currency, or?
There's always a form of currency and data and information too, so.
So they probably liked all the metrics that they get from GitHub. Also, the fact that we're all using it means that when you go and work at companies, where they have private things, you'll go like, oh, GitHub's really awesome. Let's keep our private code on GitHub, and your boss will be like, oh, then we'll have to pay for the CI minutes. You're like, yeah, but GitHub's just so great with all its issue trackers and stuff. So in my opinion, they get you to buy into the community, which is sorry, more the tool and its kind of collaborative community features. And so that's, I don't know, that's my opinion, but I don't really know what funds their revenue streams here. So kind of going down this list, it compiles with lots of different versions of GCC and Clang. So it tests that compiles with different compiler versions. And then it tests that the docs build properly. And so read the docs is a popular one. I think we have Sphinx on the table for next week with it's one of your offline ones. And so if you've ended up at the Read the Docs website before, that's quite tied together with Sphinx and a way to build documentation for projects. And so there's lots there kind of behind the scenes as well. All right, so more questions on the GitHub side. We'll come back to this, I think, as I kind of work through a demo, but okay. So let's go build some code. I already opened up this. Okay. Okay, so let's make a really simple function. Let's take something that we'll just write a function. We need this for our program. Let's say that takes a full name and splits it. I just want it split up into first and last name. I want to display it somewhere in kind of a nice fashion, do it consistently. So if you haven't seen these before, triple quotes. I can make this a little bigger. This is a Python doc string. This is how we document our function and what it does. So let's say okay, so does anyone want to write this function for me? Is that from? Okay. Something like that.
Does that return a tuple?
I don't know.
It's a list, I think.
Let's try it out. Okay, so down here you could like write some code. Yeah, tuple list is pretty. You're right. Let's leave it for now. I'm glad you guys caught it. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of like. There's lots of different ways we can write test code. I'm gonna kind of start like at a really narrow dived in spot, and then we'll kind of back out and do bigger things with this code. But for now, I really just want to build some test cases for this function. So I could make some new functions that call this, maybe a test function, things like that. But there's kind of this neat thing in Python. To be honest, I really don't use it that often, but when I'm writing kind of a little weird function, I like to try it out. It's kind of neat. So it's called doc test. So basically in your documentation, you can write little tests. I'll use my name. Okay. And And then, okay, we basically, this is essentially what we're expecting to get back, right? It's kind of neat. You can actually use the doc test module and we'll pass in this file. Okay, and it'll actually look for these little test cases using this kind of triple. It's looking for this and it says, hey, I tried this for you. This is what I was expecting to get back, but I actually got this back. So you guys are right. We should probably fix that. We said we were going to return a tuple. This kind of bugs me a little bit. Like single quote and double quote mean the same thing in Python. It really shouldn't be complaining, but I don't know. I don't like that doc test does this. It does. Okay, so and you'll see when it works, it doesn't say anything. It just runs correctly and it's nice and quiet. Okay, anyone? What other weird test cases, like what else could happen here? What else could we get passed in that we might not be expecting?
A more complicated name than just a person and last name.
Okay. Make up a more complicated name from it. Get your creative juices flowing. We're gonna have to make a lot of names here, but well, one that I can spell. So, a double last name.
Hyphenated last name, yeah.
What do you do like Jeff Goder's Jr.?
Okay, all right. So we got Andrew Lloyd Webber. Okay. And Jeff Goers Jr. Okay, so what are we expecting here?
I would expect you to have Andrew like a trip like tuple of the three names.
The three names, but my function's called get first last name. It says this is what it does. So I really just want first and last name.
Andrew Webber.
Like that? Okay.
A difficult function to write.
It's a difficult function to write. Yeah, okay. So anytime you find yourself telling yourself this, this is kind of a difficult, weird, tricky function to write, you probably want to write some test cases to make sure it works. Okay. And perhaps this is an impossible function to write, because then you could come up with someone with two first names. And I don't know of a great way to distinguish someone with two first names versus two last names. Maybe, pardon?
Neural network.
Neural network. Maybe we could look up on some website of common first and last names or something fancy. But. Okay, so anyone want to fix the code here?
Find the first space, it's like you search for the first space from the index, like slice from that index, run, slice from that index to the back.
Okay, so we could find the first space. Anything cleaner?
Split at a comma, having a comma separate the first and last names.
Comma separated? Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. I mean, you're right. You probably want to change this, but hey, sometimes when you're working with data, you don't get to do that. So this is how the data is coming in. We're just going to deal with it and do the best we can. So without changing my inputs here, how am I going to get this answer?
Oh, you have to change, so name split would make the list, and so you could like combine the layer elements, but that also doesn't cover future test cases and needs to have to keep doing it.
Okay, so we could do this. Okay.
You'd have to tuple it again.
Who knows how to fix this problem? Python, fancy Python people.
I have looked up that the split function has a max split parameter.
Max split.
Yeah, so when you say split on space,
Yeah.
then you can do comma max split equals 2. So
Oh,
most things we want is 2.
interesting. Okay. Okay, that's neat. I didn't know that that existed. Python has too many features, I think. But okay, but what about this? Is a more generic problem I have here, where it's like, oh, I want to make a
You cast it to a string, so you would have like.
Do a list comprehension.
let's make this more interesting. I know, but we are like, we're not changing the rules of the inputs, but no adding commas or pre-cleaning the data.
If you split cell by space, would it save it as basically a no character?
We'll have a bunch of empty strings.
Okay, so then you just truncate to a string, and then all the nulls scat together.
So what, I didn't know it did that. I thought it wouldn't make all of these entries.
Well, it still splits, it just doesn't split, it's just there's nothing between two spaces, so it splits into nothing. And so,
I think that's okay, because if you do like a list comprehension type thing where we say combine them with a space in between them for all of the names in the second half of names after the first one, it's gonna just combine all these empty strings and that won't hurt anything.
the space between the empty strings.
So you could just say do.
So there's some,
String concat.
yeah, I don't know. I plan to do this on the fly. It's more fun. We run into interesting things like this where I don't know how to solve the problem. So let's go back here. Let's ignore that problem for a minute. Okay. It's interesting. It was complaining when it was printing stuff. I didn't know that it did that. Okay, so if you haven't seen this before, this is like a weird little trick in Python. I use it quite often, actually. If you want to go from a list of things and basically concat them all together with a space in between, this weird space dot join, I use it quite frequently, so it's kind of a neat little thing. Okay, so let's see. What if we have this? What if all right, another fake name. Always got Pardon?
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Okay. Okay, and I mean, I like this in kind of nice format. How am I going to fix this one? Yeah.
Is a Python has a capitalized function.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what do you want to do with it? You want to put like capitalize here and yeah.
You can do string.title. That will capitalize the first letter of every word. So you can do name equals name.title.
Okay, and it does title case with it capitalized at the beginning.
Yeah, but I would just do that on the input, right? You could just do, before we split it, name equals name.title.
Like that.
Yeah, you do it preemptively, then it's just one string.
Well, name.title.
Oh, all right, okay. You're right.
And I think it's a parenthesis. It's a function call.
It's a function, not a property.
You also just call it when you're declaring names.
Okay. Okay, so there's a, let's see, there's a the capitalize, right?
That only does the first split.
Yeah, so oh, so it's actually gonna lowercase the W, huh? That doesn't work.
After the split, would it do?
After the split, okay. So I'm just trying a few things. So maybe you've done something like this. I'm gonna use it, yeah.
It says otherwise.
Oh, I can't spell. Okay. String object has no, I thought we just tried that. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Oh, I didn't save it. I thought I did, sorry. Okay, so that works. Okay. Do you know a more efficient way to write this code? So a list comprehension, does it? Okay, so this is the same thing. If you haven't had the opportunity to go learn about list comprehensions in Python, I suggest you do that. They come up everywhere. It's like building new lists out of for loops through existing lists. Okay, so I'm looping through this. I'm making a new variable called name. And then out front is essentially whatever expression I want to build into my new list. And so in this case, it's this variable dot capitalize, and it creates a new list with all of those entries. And so that works as well. Okay, so I mean, enough Python fun. This is, our function probably needs to be fancier and work with more things, but this is probably good for now. Okay, so let's do this next. Do more stuff on the fly. Okay, so that's one way of writing test code. It's not really a very common one. It's kind of more just to test little finicky functions. Usually we're writing bigger test suites. And so to do that, so what we do is we typically make a new class object. Doesn't really matter what we call it, but we inherit from unit test case. And there's different frameworks to do unit testing in Python, but the one called unit test is the one built in and ships with Python. There's other ones that are third party. PyTest is another really popular one. I don't know if unit test or PyTest is more popular. It's kind of a toss up, but we'll use the built in one. And so the way it works is you can then write some test code. And there's these different helper functions that are part of this class. So we inherited from the test case class. And so we get some little helper functions with that to do our testing. And so one of those helper functions is assert equal. So that checks that something is equal. So we could write, this is kind of alternative test code, but we have this function up here, get first last name. Oops, and we're going to test that this is equal to Bruce Wayne. Okay. And let's see, and then we can go and run this code. And this is a different module. This is the unit test module. Okay. And what I'll do is, it's kind of, this is just how it works, is it finds tests and it prints a dot every time it runs a test successfully.
So how did it know to run tests of names? Was that?
Yeah, so let's see. I just want to try that. All right. So it ran 0 tests now. So it actually looks for functions that start with the word test. Okay, so it's a little odd, but it's not uncommon for unit testing to work that way. So does my class have to be named test? I don't think so. No, it doesn't. Because it's inheriting from unit test. So you could have other helper functions in there that you wanted, and this is a really powerful and fancy framework. There's all sorts of things to go learn about it, but this is the very bare bones basic, is you make a class and you make some functions that start with the word test. And then when you run the unit test module on your code, it'll run all of those functions and print nice things for you. Okay, so maybe I want to have another one called test multiple names. And here, okay, and so you'll see now 2 little dots, 2 tests. Okay.
Does it look like when it fails?
Yeah, let's make it fail. So this is why you use the test infrastructure and not just write your own, because you get a lot of nice stuff for free. So you'll see it prints a little F for failing. It tells you which function failed. Okay. And then you get some interesting, it says, oh, the tuples differ. Okay, and if you had really long tuples with 1 million elements in them, you wouldn't want to really scan through. So it even tells you, hey, the first differing element is this one. Right? And so it knows how to compare different types of objects like strings and tuples and things like that. And so you get really nice output when you choose to use the built-in unit test frameworks. Okay, you wouldn't want to write all that yourself. So any more questions on this? Okay, so let's do some more. So another way to do testing is to see how bigger, let's do this, let's. So have you heard of this before, having a golden test file? So sometimes when we're doing testing, basically up here, these were kind of our goldens. It's kind of like, well, this is what I expect or what it should produce. So maybe we want to have a big data set and we want to have a file with 1 million names in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to produce kind of another file with all of our results and then compare those files and say, hey, you know, does it match the golden file and does it match up? And so lots of kind of test cases all at once. And so I don't know, let's try that. And maybe yesterday you learned about pandas. If you did that, we'll do a little pandas along the way here, maybe. Okay. So, okay. So we're going to test a file. First, let's go make a file. And we're going to make a CSV file, so a comma separated file. All right, so we've got Bruce Wayne. Any other takers? Come on, some more.
John Smith.
John Smith.
Jason Bourne.
John Jones.
Can't remember how it's spelled. It doesn't really matter. No E? E?
There is me.
Like that? Okay. Heard another one.
Peter Parker.
Okay.
Jean Valjean.
What, Bobby what?
Bobby Tables.
I don't know that reference.
It's XKCD.
Tables?
Yeah, tables.
Okay.
Name your child drop tables. Or something.
Yeah. Okay, I've seen that one. Okay. Yeah, I've seen that one. Okay. So what's going on here? Okay. So this is a CSV file, which is sometimes I like using the handy. I have a CSV plugin in VS Code, and so you see it kind of basically looks like a little spreadsheet. And so pandas is basically a spreadsheet editor in Python. So we'll go over here and we'll okay, so let's we can still kind of debug, I think. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So I mean it's failing, but we still see the printing along the way. Okay, so let's see. I screwed this up somehow. It's got another column. I think I wasn't supposed to really add the extra commas, if I'm remembering right. We'll just do this so that we don't end up with another column that doesn't have anything in it. Okay, so in pandas, this is called, when we read in the CSV, it's called a data frame. That's why I named my variable df. So you could go learn about data frames, but essentially a data frame is like a sheet in a spreadsheet. Okay, so it's got rows and columns, and that's kind of the basic data type that we use with pandas. And so pandas is a great way if you have lots of data to manipulate it. If you want to essentially manipulate a spreadsheet, generate figures based on columns and all sorts of things, it's quite powerful for that. Okay, so we've essentially read it in and we get an index, a row number. Okay, and this full name, and it's in here. Okay, and so we basically want to make a new column. So let's see. So first name, and then we're going to fill it up and populate it. For now, I'm just going to say 10. Okay. Now let's see what happened. Hey, pretty neat. We basically made a new column of our spreadsheet and filled it all in. Okay, and I think by default it's going to put all these numbers in it, and I don't really want that. So I don't want to output the index. Okay. Am I doing this in the wrong order? Sorry. This is how we do it.
They're giving you an error.
Is it 2 CSV?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, I could scroll up and look at the. I didn't save it properly. Okay, so sure enough, I have this data out again here. Okay, so now, I mean, I want to make a new column based on some function of the other column. Does anyone know how to do this in Pandas? Oh, luckily I've been searching recently. Oh, I had found it, but no. This one I like better. Okay, so one way, where are we here? One sec, I had a different. Let's find a good result here. So it's generally done with the apply method, but I'm just trying to find, okay. So what we can do is we can go here and we can say, we basically use the apply method. Okay, so it's making a new column. And Lambda is something you run into a lot in Python. It's basically used to make tiny little functions on the fly. Okay, so if you haven't learned about lambdas in Python, go add it to your list of things to learn about. And so it's like saying, hey, if we get a piece of data into our function, it's like an argument to the function, we'll just call that x. And what we're going to do is we're going to essentially return that. You don't even need a return statement. Okay. That's just how lambdas work. And it's yelling at me. I think the website said to do that.
Series.
What am I doing wrong here? I don't want the whole thing.
Full name?
Oh, sorry, is it full name? Is that what it's called? Full name. Okay, so now it kind of works. So what this is really doing is it's making a new column in pandas. And the way that it's doing it is it's going and it's applying this function to every row of my data. Okay, and what it passes in is actually the whole row of the table. And I only want this entry out of the row. And so that's kind of why I had to add this. And so now I've got the result of the whole function. I don't really want that. I want just element 0. Okay, and so now I have this in my CSV file, and I could do the same thing with kind of the last name. Okay, and so now I've essentially have that, and I have that written out. And so this could become kind of my golden data. This is, did it work? A little bit. We have those extra spaces in there, huh? Do you know how to get rid of those? So strip will take white space off the beginning and end of a string. Right, so it takes the space that was off of, or did we have it here? Kind of the extra space between Peter Parker, but it still leaves spaces in the middle. So we have a space in between Lloyd and Weber. So the data's cleaned up nicely. And now essentially, that's out of date. Oh, we. Doesn't it kind of seem like our file's not getting updated?
To strip it after you do join.
Oh, am I stripping it too late?
Yeah, you're stripping it too early because it has, we have, when you do join, there's all the empty strings that it joins together and it puts spaces in between them.
Ah,
And therefore, so you're going to want to strip last name right before you return it. Or
what if we do that? Have you seen this? Let's see. See if this fixes it. Here we go. So in a list comprehension, they're quite powerful. You can do filtering essentially as you're looping through your list. And so if I don't want to put empty strings into my list, I just filter them out. So I do real-time filtering here as well. Okay, so now I'm quite happy with kind of, I have this nice golden copy. In fact, I'm going to go and rename it golden. Okay, and so I'm gonna not print this anymore. And so what I'm going to do is I'm gonna send that to out. And then I will compare that the two files match. And that will be my test case in the future. So there's probably a nicer, fancier way to check that these two files match. I'm just gonna do it in a really lame way since we're running out of time. I'm just gonna say, okay, so it's actually a different test that's failing all this time. There's
The
been
extra
something that,
space
like-
you put in Lloyd Webber.
Oh, right, right. We said we wanted to make it fail, right? Okay. Okay, so I don't know. I've never seen this before. Unclosed file.
You
Okay.
usually do with open.
Yeah, I thought this would close it. But okay, so here's another thing we can learn about in Python. I've opened a file, but I've never closed it. And so it'll kind of hang on to this file. And depending on the operating system, I might hang on for too long. And so Python's got this nice little thing where you can say, with this, I'll just say this is gonna be my file pointer, and I'll say file pointer.read. And so it cleans itself up once you essentially leave the with block. It does some cleaning up, and in this case, it will close the file back up. So as you come across Python code, you may see this. This is generally the modern way to read and write files in Python is a with statement, because it cleans itself up. Okay. Oops. Okay, so now everything passes, and I have a nice set of data that's basically all these test cases, and I could add more test cases in the future. I'd have to kind of update my golden file to do that. But this is a nice way if somebody comes along and changes my code in some way and says, oh, this is dumb. What do we have this here for? Let me just like get rid of that. Okay. Then when they go to actually push their code up, okay, it's going to run my test case. It's going to compare it to the golden copy I have and say, no, you've broken the code and you can't push this up. Okay. Okay, so this is about it for this case. I said I'd show you how to do this on GitHub, so let's just take about 10 or 15 more minutes to look at how we do that. Okay, so I'm going to make a new repository here. Okay, I'll make it private, but not public in case any of you want to look at it while we do it. Okay. So here's the steps I have to run here. Let's see. I need to get init this, and I need to kind of add all this stuff to my repo. Okay, I'll do an initial commit. I don't like this CPython thing that's showing up here. It's in my PyCache folder, so we're going to get rid of that. And I actually wanted that with my last commit. I don't know if you can, there's an amend, you can add it to your last commit. I'm lazy, I just do it to the GUI. And so what else? Git says, maybe you want to rename your master to main, since that's kind of convention these days, so we'll do that. I need to add this remote so that I can push it up to that remote. And now I am ready to push my new code up. Okay, and sure enough, here it is. If we refresh, my code is now up here. Okay, so we wanna make some tests that run every time I push new things. And so I'm gonna, let's see, we're gonna use the bootcamp one as kind of a template here. And it's amazingly quick. So we need a GitHub folder, and in a GitHub folder, we need a workflows directory. So we're gonna kind of add these. The GitHub folder is hidden. And then you need a YAML file. I don't know if you've used YAML before. It's just like XML or JSON or different ways to store keys and values. So it doesn't matter what you call it. I'm going to call it CI. Okay, and let's see. I'm going to use my example. So here's my example. So I'm going to name it. I'm going to take all of this here and steal this here. Okay, so I'm going to name it. We're just going to name it. Let's see. Python unit tests. Okay, and you can choose when this is run, this check. Okay, it could run every time somebody pushes code up, or it could just run on pull requests. I'm happy with both of those. And then you kind of follow this. And again, there's resources online to learn more about all this kind of little language they have here. But I'm going to run it on Ubuntu latest. Okay. There's lots of different machines. They're virtual machines, but there's different machines you can run it on the Microsoft servers. Okay, you can run it on the latest Ubuntu, which I'm not sure if that's 20 or 22 that they're running it on. You could run it on some older version. You can run it on Windows. You can run it on Mac. Okay, you pay more money to run it on Windows or Mac. I think it's like every minute counts as like 5 or 10 minutes of your time. So I don't know if open is still just unlimited minutes, but if you have a private repo, you're paying, I think, like 10x to run it on a Mac environment. Okay, so this is kind of always the first thing. You say uses. You say uses actions checkout version 2. Okay, this is how it gets your repository. It basically does a clone, like a Git clone, but it's a bit fancier than that, because imagine your repository is private. How's the GitHub server going to be able to access your private repository? This kind of checkout action handles things like that. It knows a good way to go and get your code for this repository. So that's what everybody uses. That's pretty much always the first step of your action. When we build the website, we need Ruby. We don't need Ruby here, so we don't care about this. Okay. And then these are basically the steps. So you can give your steps names. This one doesn't have a name. This one, we're going to call it unit test. Was it names.py? Okay. And remember, we also kind of tried out using doc test. So I'm gonna try running both of these. And let me push this up to GitHub. Okay. Now, I'm not sure if it runs the first time. I don't think so. I think because it didn't really exist yet. But in future commits it will. So let's go here and look first. So we should at least see the GitHub workflows. Uh-oh. And you'll see this is new. There's now like a kind of a current status of essentially tried to run my actions. And let's see what happened. Okay, so it says, hey, I tried to run Python unit tests. Okay, so so it did try and run it the first time. It ran the checkout correctly. Okay. And then it tried to run unit test, right? This is the name we gave it. We called the first step unit test. And it got stuck here. It couldn't import pandas. Okay. I think we're still okay. Okay, so let's go back here. And let's make another step first. We'll just say install dependencies. Okay, and
Would it be names or just name?
thanks. Catch. Okay, and we gotta catch this. This is fast. Okay. So you'll see it's a yellow dot. It's working. Okay, it's working on our action here. We could go to actions and we see everything. It's spinning. We have the history of everything that's ever been run for actions on our repository. We can click into this one. And it's running build, right? Oh, that was a dumb name. That was the name that we gave it here for the job. We should probably, I don't know if the space is there, but let's rename that something else. And it's okay. That one finished successfully, okay? You can have multiple of them going at the same time. You can push new stuff while the last one's still working. And every single, because we did it on push, every single push it's gonna run this. If you push 5 times and they take 10 hours to run, it's gonna run 50 hours of compute to finish it all off, okay? But you'll see this one worked and we renamed the CI job. So now it should be called unit tests here. And it seems to have already succeeded as well. Okay, so I'll do the last piece here. What if you want to kind of control some access to your repository and you want to make sure that people pass these tests before they commit code to your repository? So what we can do here is I'm going to go over here and just show you a little bit more. This is more on the administration side. But we can go to branches and say, hey, it says, hey, you got a default branch. It's called main. And none of your branches are really protected here. So I'm going to basically protect my main branch. And I'm going to say, hey, you have to create a pull request. We don't need a code review, but you do have to pass my status check. And then you kind of have to search here. We called it unit tests. Okay, so we're gonna add that. Then we're gonna come down here and create. Oh, okay. Okay, so now this branch protection rule is set up. So let's go try this over here. We'll do the same thing. I'm gonna make a new branch. Call it nice contribution. And we'll just do the same thing that we already did. We'll get rid of this. Remove, useless, check. Okay, we'll push this branch up. And then we could come over here and someone says, hey, you know, I want to make a pull request. Okay. I'll create the pull request and you'll see here it's going to run my little check that I set up. And it's running it on essentially the code you pushed up, and it's running it on the pull request. So it essentially runs it on that person's branch. Okay, and it runs it, and then it says, okay, now what if I merge things and then I run it as well? You might say, well, that's the same, but their branch could actually be out of date, and you can merge out of date a little bit. So that's why it runs both of them. And you'll see that it fails and says, hey, no, that's too bad. You can't merge your code in because it's breaking our tests. Yeah.
Check it off the unit tests that are actually. If you change the unit tests in your branch, though, would it?
Oh, like, you mean if I was being a little bit malicious?
Yeah.
And said, oh, I'm failing this check. Let's get rid of this check. Yeah, you could get rid of it and things would be okay. Okay, but hopefully whoever looks at does a code review of your pull request is like, why are you changing our unit test code? That doesn't make sense. So. But yeah, your pull request, the more common thing, rather than to kind of maliciously hide things, the more common thing would be to be like, well, I'm contributing a new feature and I've added a new test to your test suite to try it out. And so that's one project we contribute to. It says, we kind of have to check these little boxes. It says, you know, are you adding a feature? And that's check a box. And it says, have you created a unit test to try this feature out? And you have to check that box too, because they want to know that you're not just kind of adding untested code into the repository. And so now this is good. I have a nice little repo that hopefully no one will break in the future. Even as we work together as a team and add new code and add things, I can kind of always be sure that at least this piece of Python is going to always kind of pass the tests I set up for it. And I don't have to worry about someone coming along in the future and breaking it. And so this is how we work on big software projects with lots of people doing different things. And otherwise it would just be so fragile where things are breaking all the time. This is kind of the peace and comfort that everybody can work together and still have things that compile and work all the time. That this is really, at least it's the peace and comfort for me and when I work on big projects, that things are still living and running and working correctly. And so you may have heard people say like, oh, like the main branch is always working, go do your work on some other branch. And so always working kind of means that when I come here, I always kind of see that nice little green check mark here. And I don't ever see the red X when I'm sitting on the main branch. So one other neat thing I'll show you, the last thing. Let's see, I have to find this on the fly. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. You'll have to go learn how to do it. You can add these cool little badges and you can like, oops. You may see them on different projects, but you can embed them on like your READMEs and things like this. So it kind of says, oh, all my tests are green like my tests are passing, my docs are passing, and so it's kind of this nice little badge you award yourself. I think of that, the Obama meme where he's like putting the award around his. So, but right, it's kind of nice if you go up on GitHub and you find some new project, you're like, hey, is anyone actually using this thing? You scroll down and see this, you're like, okay, at least they have some tests and they think their thing's still working and it's not broken. So, yeah.
So this is like a hard-coded passing badge. It doesn't like check the tests every once in a while.
It does.
Okay.
When the tests break, that'll change.
Okay.
It's a neat little thing you can embed in that like generates it based on the status of a test you pointed out. So I'll leave it for you. Different places like GitPod, different places have ways to access their badges differently. But no, it's a real live badge. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming.